blood, come the prince that was promised, and his will be disarmed ice and fire.
Welcome back, Watchers Beyond the Wall. My name is Monica, and if you don't know who I am, I post videos pertaining to a Song of Ice and Fire content, and a little bit of whatever is on my mind. Here, we deep dive and overanalyze re-watching shows and movies over and over again to understand what the writer is trying to tell us. Without further ado, brace yourselves for rewatch. Old Valyria was a mightiest empire located on the eastern continent of Essos, known for its vast continent and powerful sorcery and weaponizing dragons for warfare.
At its apex, Valyria was the greatest city in the known world, the center of civilization. Within its shining walls, 200 rival houses vied for power and glory in court and council, rising and falling in an endless, subtle, off-savage struggle for dominance.
The Valyrians were the pillar of expertise, mastering these formidable beasts, using the empire structure of Old Gist to forge a powerful empire spanning most of Essos' continent. The capital of Valyria had sprawling cities filled with grandeur and elaborate tapestries. That was groundbreaking technology that nobody has ever been able to replicate in present-day Game of Thrones. However, the height of Valyria's power and prosperity came to a cataclysmic end in the catastrophic events known as the Doom of Valyria.
But Lord Aegon's maiden daughter Daenys, known forever afterward as Daenys the Dreamer, had foreseen the destruction of Valyria by far. And when the doom came 12 years later, the Targaryens were the only dragon lords to survive.
In a single day and night, the great civilization was shattered by the series of the 14th flames erupting. Earthquakes and other natural disasters took them by storm. The doom itself was foreseen by Daenys the Dreamer.
But I dreamt that if I carried those eggs into a great fire, they would hatch.
Who foresaw it in a prophetic vision of the doom of Valyria, destruction by fire. In 114 BC, her father, Lord Aegon Targaryen, led a warning, sailing his ships and the Valyrian Freehold's family to Dragonstone, off the coast of Westeros. The Targaryens were the only ones, besides the Valyrians, to survive the doom of Valyria.
12 years before the Doom of Valyria, 114 BC, Aegon Targaryen sold his holdings in the Freehold and the lands of the Long Summer and moved with all his wives, wealth, slaves, dragons, siblings, kin, and children to Dragonstone, a bleak island citadel beneath a smoking mountain in the narrow sea.
They brought 5 dragons, including Balerion the Black Dread, to Westeros at the time. 12 years later, the doom would strike, and House Targaryen, the only surviving dragon-riding family, would survive the doom. Daenys later married her brother, Gaemon, who succeeded their father as Lord of Dragonstone. They had children named Aegon, Elena Targaryen, as well as another daughter who married a petty lord. The doom of Valyria's freehold is in ruins, and the once mighty empire was reduced to ash and rubble. The series of events regarding the doom is still a mystery, but the impact is still inevitable and still shapes the lives of many. Nobody is able to travel through the ashy ruins that is once known as the mightiest empire that this world has ever seen. At some point, Lord Aegon Targaryen of Dragonstone had a dragon dream.
Our histories. They tell us that Aegon looked across the Blackwater from Dragonstone, saw a rich land ripe for the capture. But ambition alone is not what drove him to conquest. It was a dream.
a prophetic vision that showed the coming of the others. Aegon called this dream a Song of Ice and Fire. In 1 AC, after the conquest, Aegon Targaryen, alongside his sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys, launched a campaign, an ambitious one at that, to conquer the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. With their 3 dragons, Balerion the Black Dread, Vhagar, and Meraxes, they brought fire and blood to the realm, changing it forever.
I am Daenerys Stormborn of the blood of Old Valyria, and I will take what is mine. With fire and blood, I will take it.
Predecessor. 12 years before the Doom of Valyria, Lord Aegon Targaryen relocated his family to Dragonstone, the westernmost outpost of Old Valyria's freehold.
Except for Aegon Targaryen, his children, and his dragons, who had fled to Dragonstone and so escaped the Doom. Some accounts claim that a few others survived too, for a time. It is said that some Valyrian dragon lords in Tyrosh and Lys were spared, but that in the immediate political upheaval following the Doom, they and their dragons were killed by the citizens of those free cities.
During the Century of Blood, various factions formed with a power vacuum in Essos. Near the end of this period, the young Lord Aegon Targaryen rode his dragon, Balerion, who was approached by the free cities of Pentos and Tyrosh to form an alliance.
The proudest city in all the world was gone in an instant. The fabled empire vanished in a day.
Aegon assisted them to defeat the Volantene fleet before returning to Dragonstone. With this power struggle being concluded in the east, Aegon shifted his focus towards the west, towards the lands of Westeros that had always intrigued him.
As for Aegon Targaryen, shortly after his role in defeating Volantis, it is written that he lost all interest in the affairs of the East. Believing Volantis' rule at an end, he flew back to Dragonstone, and now, no longer distracted by the wars of Essos, he turned his gaze west.
Some believe Aegon had never even visited Westeros before his invasion, though some reports of him visiting the Arbor, the Citadel, and possibly Lannisport over the years have been made. Years before the conquest, he commissioned the Painted Table, a large carving of the map of Westeros that is housed in Dragonstone. Harren, the king of the Howls and the Rivers, was near completion of his grand castle, Harrenhal, and was rumored to seek further conquest. Argilac Durrandon feared Harren may oppose him and aligned with Aegon to create a buffer. He offered his daughter Algela's hand in marriage alongside her dowager lands and dowagery, much of which controlled by Harren. Aegon refused, suggesting instead he could court his best friend and rumored half-brother, Orys Baratheon, to marry Argela, and asked for the dowageries to be passed on from her to him. Argilac was insulted, cutting off the hands of Aegon's envoy and sent him back with the message, "These are the only hands you will receive."
The pact would be sealed by the marriage of King Argilac's daughter to Orys Baratheon, Lord Aegon's childhood friend and champion. These terms Argilac the Arrogant rejected angrily. Orys Baratheon was a base-born half-brother to Lord Aegon, it was whispered.
In response, Aegon called his banners and consulted with his sisters. He sent ravens to every ruler of the 7 kingdoms, declaring himself the sole king of Westeros and proclaiming that whoever bent the knee would be spared lands and titles, but if you did not, you would be destroyed. Aegon saw the envisionment of one ruler for 7 kingdoms.
You'll dishonor yourself forever if you do this.
Honor? I've got 7 kingdoms to rule. 1 king, 7 kingdoms. Do you think honor keeps them in line? Do you think it's honor that's keeping the peace? It's fear. fear and blood.
And doing so would have made a drastic change within Westerosi history. Several terms were considered, but ultimately Aegon refused. Maria Martell, Princess of Dorne, offered to align with Aegon against the Storm King Argilac, but refused because she would have never bent the knee. Aegon declared himself as the sole king and ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. Similarly, Shara Erin, Queen Regent of the Vale, also suggested an alliance, but if they did this, she would still not bend. Aegon also rejected this proposition. The war began in 2 AC when Aegon and his sister wives Rhaenys and Visenya landed with fewer than 1,600 men at the mouth of Blackwater Rush near the Three Hills. On the highest hill, Aegon began to construct Aegon's Fort, a wooden fortification to establish his foothold on the mainland of Westeros. The Targaryens were supported by House Celtigar, Massey, and Valerian. House Rosby surrendered. Rosby knelt to Rhaenys, while House Stoneworth yielded to Visenya after Vhagar's dragonfire set their roof ablaze. Aegon's first significant change came from Lord Darkland of Duskendale and Lord Mutin of Maidenpool, who claimed their forces and marched southward with 3,000 men. Aegon sent Orys Baratheon to intercept them while he attacked from above with Balerion. Both lords were killed in this battle, and Darkland's son and Mutin's brother, Jon Mutin, surrendered their castles and pledged fealty to the alliance of House Targaryen. In a ceremony act, Queen Visenya placed a Valyrian steel circlet around Aegon's head with ruby-red gemstones, and Queen Rhaenys proclaimed him Aegon, first of his name, king of all Westeros and the shield of his people.
From this day forth there would be but one king in Westeros. Those who bent the knee to Aegon of House Targaryen would keep their lands and titles. Those who took up arms against him would be thrown down, humbled, and destroyed.
The first of his name, Aegon Targaryen. Aegon Targaryen, also known as Aegon the Conqueror or Aegon the Dragon, was the first lord of the Seven Kingdoms and the first king to sit upon the Iron Throne. He claimed 6 of the 7 kingdoms, and his legacy of conquest was revered and feared.
"Lord husband," said Queen Selyse, "you have more men than Aegon did 300 years ago. All you lack are dragons." The look Stannis gave her was dark.
Also, he formed the Targaryen dynasty in Westeros. Aegon left an indelible mark on the realm of men. Born on Dragonstone in 27 BC to Lord Aegon Targaryen and Lady Valyna Valerian, Aegon had an older sister, Visenya, and a younger sister, Rhaenys. Following Valyrian and Targaryen tradition, he would marry within his family.
Aegon had 2 true-born siblings, an elder sister, Visenya, and a younger sister, Rhaenys. It had long been the custom amongst the dragon lords of Valyria to wed brother to sister, to keep the bloodlines pure. But Aegon took both his sisters to bride.
But the unique part about Aegon is he didn't take one sister to be wife, but he took both. It is believed he married Visenya out of duty, as she was the eldest sister, to secure his succession.
What have I done but what was expected of me? Forever upholding the kingdom, the family, the law. Will you flout it all to do as you please?
Alicent, let her go!
Where is duty? Where is sacrifice?
But he married Rhaenys out of love. Before his marriage, Aegon had already claimed the mightiest dragon, Balerion. Balerion, known as the Black Dread, was one of House Targaryen's most legendary dragons, famous for being ridden by Aegon, the first of his name during the conquest of Westeros. Balerion was also mounted by other noble factions within House Targaryen, including his son, King Maegor, that was also known as being cruel within his reign of terror. Balerion lived over 2 centuries,
and Aegon rode Balerion, the Black Dread, and Balerion, his fire, was as black as his scales, his wings so vast that whole towns were swallowed up in their shadow when he passed overhead.
Passing away in 94 AC during the reign of King Jaehaerys Targaryen. With scales and wings as black as night, Balerion's fire was capable of melting steel and stone and fusing sand into glass. His impenetrable size was able to cast shadows to engulf entire towns, and his teeth were as long as swords. By 93 AC, Balerion had grown sluggish and was struggling to fly. He was once the mightiest and strongest dragon, but now he was failing. Born in Old Valyria and named after an ancient Valyrian god, Balerion was one of 5 dragons brought to Dragonstone by Aenys.
Balerion was the last living creature to have seen Old Valyria before the Doom. Its greatness and its flaws.
Before the collapse of Old Valyria, as the last surviving memory and the last dragon who had ever survived the era, he was the last link to the Freehold's prime. Aegon was tall, broad shoulders, and powerful in appearance. With his striking purple eyes and short cropped silver hair, he was charismatic and had a commanding presence within the battlefield. His battle attire was a shirt of black scales, grooves, gauntlet, and a cloak, among with the Valyrian steel sword, Blackfire. His crown was a simple Valyrian circlet set with large squared cut-out rubies. Despite his imposing presence, Aegon was a quiet and somber character, with his only close friend being Orys Baratheon, while it is thought to believe that he was a bastard and half-brother to Aegon. A formidable warrior, Aegon rode Balerion on battles and traveled with him as a company companion. He never participated in tourneys. He was a dragon dreamer, guided by prophetic dreams and prophecies. He maintained the status quo following the Faith of the Seven for only political reasons. He was harsh to those who betrayed him or defied him, rebelling against him, but he was generous to those who surrendered.
Aegon the Conqueror brought fire and blood to Westeros, but afterward he gave them peace, prosperity, and justice. But all I have brought to Slaver's Bay is death and ruin.
And it gave him a sense of strength within this balance of power. Visenya Targaryen. Queen Visenya Targaryen, the eldest sister and wife of King Aegon I, was a formidable war hero in the early years of the Targaryen dynasty.
Visenya.
Vhagar's first rider, and the first wielder of Dark Sister.
I hope you do not mean to use her as an example.
Why shouldn't I?
Oh, it was a long time ago.
She was the younger sister to Rhaenys Targaryen, who also married Aegon. Visenya was a dragon rider, bonded with the mighty dragon Vhagar. Vhagar was a legendary she-dragon of House Targaryen, ridden by Queen Visenya Targaryen during Aegon's conquest alongside Balerion and Meraxes.
Aegon's dragons were named for the gods of Old Valyria, she told her blood riders one morning after a long night's journey. Visenya's dragon was Vhagar. Rhaenys had Meraxes. It was said that Vhagar's breath was so hot that he could melt a knight's armor and cook the man inside, that Meraxes swallowed horses whole.
Later writers include Prince Balon Targaryen, Lady Laena Velaryon, and Prince Aemon Targaryen, names named after an ancient god of Old Valyria. Vhagar is described by George R. Martin as being bronze with greenish-blue highlights and bright green eyes. Vhagar was massive. According to Tywin Lannister, one could have a horse ride down her gullet. Her breath was hot enough to melt and cook a man within his armor. By the dance of the dragon, she was the eldest and largest dragon in Westeros history at the time, nearly as big as Balerion was a couple decades before.
All three siblings had shown themselves to be dragon lords before they wed. Of the 5 dragons who had flown with Aenor the Exile from Valyria, only one survived to Aegon's day, the great beast called Balerion, the Black Dread. The remaining 2 dragons, Vhagar and Meraxes, were younger, hatched on Dragonstone itself.
Her roar could shake the foundation of Storm's End, unmatched to any other size within an ecostructure of Westeros. Hatching as a dragon egg on Dragonstone during the Century of Blood, Vhagar was claimed by Visenya before her marriage to Aegon, solidifying her status as a formidable dragon rider. Visenya embodied the classic Valyrian features with her long silver gold hair, accompanied with braids and adored with rings and jewelry. Her striking violet eyes and her ethereal beauty was harsher than her sister Rhaenys, who was revered as being naturally beautiful, known for her valor and rumored to be into dark sorcery and potions.
Visenya, eldest of the 3 siblings, was as much a warrior as Aegon himself, as comfortable in ringmail as in silk. She carried the Valyrian longsword Dark Sister, and was skilled in its use, having trained beside her brother since childhood.
She was unique because she was able to comfortably be in silk gowns and chainmail armor. As a warrior, she wielded the Valyrian steel longsword Dark Sister. Born in 29 BC on Dragonstone to Lord Aegon Targaryen and Lady Valyrian Velaryon, Visenya was the eldest of 3 siblings. From a young age, she trained alongside Aegon, becoming a skilled warrior. In her youth, Visenya and Aegon were known to visit the citadel of Oldtown and Lord Redwine of the Arbor, showcasing their ability and strength. Her legend is marked by doubling duels, a formidable warrior, and a powerful queen, enduring the Targaryen conquest and shaping the realm of Westeros. Rhaenys Targaryen. Queen Rhaenys Targaryen, the youngest sister of King Aegon, played a pivotal role in the early dynasty of the Targaryens. Alongside her older sister Visenya, Rhaenys was also married to Aegon, with many believing that he favored her rather than her older sister.
By tradition, he was expected to wed only his older sister, Visenya. The inclusion of Rhaenys as a second wife was unusual, though not without precedent. It was said by some that Aegon wed Visenya out of duty and Rhaenys out of desire.
Though their son, Aerys, is the line of dragon kings continuing with 15 of the 16 Targaryen kings, it is thought and believed the descendants of the Targaryen dynasty are from the lines of Rhaenys and Aegon. Rhaenys was a dragon rider, bonded to the dragon Meraxes.
Rhaenys, youngest of the 3 Targaryens, was all her sister was not. Playful, curious, impulsive, given to flights of fancy. No true warrior, Rhaenys loved music, dancing, and poetry, and supported many a singer, mummer, and puppeteer.
Meraxes was a she-dragon of House Targaryen, ridden by Rhaenys Targaryen during Aegon's conquest, alongside King Aegon with Balerion and her sister Queen Visenya Targaryen with Vhagar. Named after a god of Old Valyria, Meraxes had a golden eye hue shift with silver scales. According to Tyrion Lannister, Meraxes was larger than Vhagar, but smaller than Balerion, with the capability of swallowing horses whole. However, these claims are uncertain, since history sources describe Vhagar as nearly large as Balerion, but I think that's during a dance of Dragons a couple years after Balerion's death, and Meraxes died decades before Vhagar did. Hatched on Dragonstone during the Century of Blood, Meraxes was claimed by Rhaenys before her marriage to Aegon. Rhaenys, known for her passion of flying, spent more time on Meraxes than any of her other siblings. She even contemplated flying across the Sunset Sea to explore the shore's westerland.
Yet it was said that Rhaenys spent more time on Dragonback than her brother and sister combined. For above all things she loved to fly. She once was heard to say that before she died, she meant to fly Meraxes across the Sunset Sea to see what lay upon its western shores.
She was a beautiful woman with golden silver hair, keeping it long and loose. She had striking violet eyes, known for her kind-hearted nature and graceful demeanor. Rhaenys was also playful, curious, and impulsive, often incurring in fights of fancy. She had a mischievous personality and loved music and dancing and poetry. Her greatest passion was flying, and she wanted to take Meraxes anywhere. It is thought to believe that she rode more than her other siblings combined. Battles in the water off Gulltown. Aegon Targaryen, Lord of Dragonstone, boldly declared himself a conqueror and wanted to unite the 7 kingdoms of Westeros under his rule. His ambition stirred the realm.
Like Aegon, ye begin as Lord of Dragonstone. Like Aegon, ye shall conquer. Let the false and the fickle feel your flames.
And Queen Regent Shara Arryn represented her son, Ronald Arryn, King of the Mountain and the Vale, sought to forge an alliance. She sent Aegon a portrait of herself and proposed a marriage opportunity, with the condition that Ronald would be named heir. Aegon was unmoved by this feeble attempt and refused. Following his coronation at the mouth of Blackwater Rush, King Aegon launched a decisive move. He dispatched his fleet, commanded by Daemon Valerian, and accompanied by his sisters, Queen Visenya Targaryen, to seize Gulltown in the Vale of Arryn.
The Targaryen fleet, under Daemon Valerian, left Blackwater Bay and turned north for Gulltown and the Vale. With them went Queen Visenya and Vhagar.
The Arryns scrambled to defend their territory, hastily assembling a fleet of 12 Braavosi warships. Their fleet, scattered across the coast of Gulltown, initially had victory, defeating the Targaryen fleet and killing Daemon Valerian. The tide turned when Visenya Targaryen descended upon them with her dragon Vhagar, unleashing a cataclysmic annihilation on the Eyrie fleet. The battle ended in a tactical draw. Both fleets laid in ruin, but it was a strategic defeat for the Targaryens, who had failed to capture Gulltown.
It glimmers prettily, I'll grant you, but on the Blackwater this magic sword served me no better than any common steel. A dragon would have turned that battle. Aegon once stood here, as I do, looking down on this table. Do you think we would name him Aegon the Conqueror today if he had not had dragons?
In the aftermath of their loss, the sister men of the three sisters declared that their devastation loss of their fleet parted ways from House Arryn and crowned Marlyn Sunderland as their queen, adding a new layer of chaos to the power struggle. Burning of Harrenhal. Arryn, what is outside my wall is no concern to me. Those walls are strong and thick, Aegon, but not so high as to keep out dragons. Dragons fly. Arryn, I built in stone. Stone does not burn. Aegon, once the sun sets, your line shall end. During Aegon's conquest, a pivotal and brutal act unfolded, the burning of Harrenhal. As King Aegon I began his campaign to unite Westeros, his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread, would deliver a cataclysmic blow to House Hole.
The king himself marched northeast to the God's Eye and Harrenhal, the gargantuan fortress that was the pride and obsession of King Harren the Black.
As he ended the reign over the Iron Islands and the Riverlands. King Harren the Black had spent nearly 40 years and countless lives constructing the colossal castle of Harrenhal, the largest castle in Westeros. Believed to be impregnable, his naivety proved devastating for his line.
Harren the Black thought this castle would be his legacy. Greatest fortress ever built. Tallest towers, the strongest walls. The Great Hall had 35 hearths.
The castle, although huge, with massive walls, located on the northern shore of the God's Eye, was designed to withstand and outstand sieges. But ultimately, the day that Harrenhal was completed, Aegon landed at the mouth of Blackwater Rush, igniting flames of war. Harren was supported by Ironborn lords and warriors, mustering his forces against Aegon's army in the Battle of the Reeds, a Targaryen victory, although it was marred by heavy losses.
Harren the Black had driven thousands to their deaths in the building of his great castle of Harrenhal, plundering the riverlands for materials and beggaring lords and small folk alike with his appetite for gold. So now the riverlands rose against him, led by Lord Edmund Tully of Riverrun.
And later in the Battle of the Wailing Widow, where Harren's men triumphed within victory, this would only happen for a few nights, as they realized how suppressive Harren was with his iron fist grip over the river lords. The power went to Harren's head. With the harsh treatment of House Bracken and Blackwood, they turned against him. Lord Edmund Tully of River Run, who had been wronged by Harren, dispatched and went to Aegon's side, followed by other countless river lords, such as House Bracken, Masterly, Vansa, Bracken's, Pipers, Freys, and Strongs. They together sieged Harrenhal, forcing Harren to close his locked gates.
Stone does not burn, Harren had boasted. But his castle was not made of stone alone. Wood and wool, hemp and straw, bread and salted beef and grain all took fire, nor were Harren's iron men made of stone.
During a pardon, Aegon once again offered Harren a chance to lay down his arms and accept the title of Lord of the Iron Islands if he surrendered. But confidently, he said that his castles could withstand any attack and refused, dismissing Aegon's warning that if he shall continue this useless war, his line of House Harden would end. It's also rumored that inside Harrenhal, he promised riches to any of the daughters of the river lords, that if they could slay Balerion, they could have as much wealth as they desired.
When no dragon appeared, some may have thought that Aegon's threats had been hollow. But Aegon Targaryen took Balerion up high, through the clouds, up and up until the dragon was no bigger than a fly upon the moon. Only then did he descend, well inside the castle walls.
As night fell, Aegon soared high above Harrenhal on Balerion. The dragon unleashed upon the castle, igniting it in a chasmus of fire. The towering of walls and stone buildings crumbled and could not withstand the blaze of intensity with the dragon fire. The castle's splendor crumbled and fell. It looked as though it was a candle burning and melting away, witnessing outside the horrific scene of the towers melting down.
On wings as black as pitch, Balerion plunged through the night, and when the great towers of Harrenhal appeared beneath him, the dragon roared his fury and bathed them in black fire, shot through with swirls of red.
It was the largest cataclysm that Westeros had seen yet, and is rumored to be haunted because of it. In the largest tower, which is now named the Tower of King Spire, Harren and his sons perished due to the Inferno. With the destruction of Harrenhal, House Hall was obliterated. The blackened remnants of the Iron Man's sword were eventually taken to Aegon's fort and melted down on the Iron Throne. Other few Harren supporters survived to travel back to the Iron Island. The day after the burning, Lord Edmure Tully pledged his allegiance to Aegon, who named him Lord Paramount of the Trident. Aegon then took sworn oaths from all the River Lords and witnessed them to be paramount of the houses within Westeros. Rewarded, the partially remained of Harrenhal was Quentyn Clawharies, a master of arms from Dragonstone. Last Storm. In a desperate attempt to stave off the looming threat of Harrenhal, the arduous Storm King Argilac Durrandon sought out to alliance with Aegon, Lord of Dragonstone. He clumsily proposed marriage between his daughter, Argella, and Aegon, offering the lands east of the God's Eye between the Trident and the Blackwater Rush as a dowry. These lands, once above the dominion of the Stormlands, are now held by House Hall. Aegon, unmoved by Argilac's offer, countered with a bold demand: the succession of Marcy's Hook and the territories beyond Blackwater, with the Windwater and the Manderleys, land held by the Stormlands. This would be sufficient to seal a deal between Argella and Orys Baratheon, Aegon's childhood friend and rumored half-brother. Infuriated by this audacious counteroffer, Argilac responded with brutal means, sending Aegon's envoy back without hands and a chilling message: "These are the only hands your bastard shall have of mine." This act of defiance hardened Aegon's resolve to conquer Westeros. After landing at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush and being crowned by his sister wives Rhaenys and Visenya, Aegon secured the Riverlands and subdued House Hall and the fiery ruins of Harrenhal. He then ordered Orys Baratheon and his other sister wives to meet with the Stormlands, Rhaenys, determined not to meet the same fiery end and fate of Harren.
Argilac the Arrogant gathered a great host about him at Storm's End. The seat of the Durrandons was a mighty fastness, its great curtain wall even thicker than the walls of Harrenhal. It too was thought to be impregnable to assault.
Argilac rallied his bannermen to Storm's End. Chaos ensued as Lord Buckler, Arryn, and Fell ascended upon Orys' vanguard, the Windworther, only to retreat into the Kingswood. Rhaenys responded with fire and fury, scorching the forest with Meraxes' dragonfire.
So Argilac the Arrogant gave the command to attack, and the battle known to history as the Last Storm began.
The Stormlanders were therefore subdued by pirates, by the Stepstones, and Dornish raiders from the Red Mountains. From her dragon Meraxes, Rhaenys observed Archelax's movements, while Orys fortified his position in the hills south of the Bronze Gate. As the two armies converged, a violent storm unleashed tons of rain against the Targaryen host. Archelax, confident in his pursuit and numbers, did not retreat and pressed on the attack.
Lords fell and Buckler, falling back before the approaching host. Lord Errol had been killed, had sent him word of Queen Rhaenys and her dragon. The old warrior king roared that he did not intend to die as Harren had, cooked inside his own castle like a suckling pig with an apple in his mouth. No stranger to battle, he would decide his own fate, sword in hand.
Even when the worsening of conditions occurred, Archelax initially charged with barding down by the muddy terrain with steep slopes, but his men gained the higher ground, conquering 2 hills at a time. His 14 charges broke off through the Targaryens' center of the confronting ground of Rhaenys on the ground of Meleys amidst the storm. The Queen unleashed dragonfire upon the Durrandon's vanguard leader, including Dickon Mont, Dickon Morgan, and the bastard of Blackraven, including overthrowing Archelax's vanguard in chaos. The Storm King fought fiercely, slaying 6 men and fending off another 6. Orys rode down from the hill to confront him. The two emerged, inflicting wounds upon each other.
The death of their king took all heart out of the Stormlanders, and as the word spread that Argilac had fallen, his lords and knights threw down their swords and fled.
Which later emerged that Archelax fell, meeting his death amidst the battle as his forces surrendered or fled. With the death of her father, Princess Argella Durrandon barred herself within Storm's End, declaring herself Storm Queen.
Rather than bend the knee, the defenders of Storm's End would die to the last man, she promised, when Queen Rhaenys flew Meraxes into the castle to parley. You may take my castle, but you will win only bones and blood and ashes, she announced.
However, her garrison had a fearful that they would meet the same fate as Harren did. So, within 10 days, they took Argella and delivered her to Orys Baratheon. He found her in chains and naked. Orys was disgusted by the acts committed against their proclaimed queen. He treated her with an unexplainable kindness.
That night they raised a peace banner, threw open the castle gate, and delivered Lady Argella, gagged, chained, and naked, to the camp of Orys Baratheon. It is said that Baratheon unchained her with his own hands, wrapped his cloak around her, poured her wine, and spoke to her gently, telling her of her father's courage and the manner of his death.
Removing her chains, offering his cloak, and offering her food and wine. He would later marry her and become Lord Paramount of the Stormlands, and founded House Baratheon, adopting the sigil and words of House Durrandon. After the Stormlands was subdued, Rhaenys joined Aegon at the Field of Fire, reinstating their quest of uniting Westeros. Submission of Crackclaw Point. Following the death of Harren the Black at Harrenhal, Aegon sent his sister queen Visenya to demand the submission of the men at Crackclaw Point. The lords understood that they had no chance against Vhagar and the other dragons, so they laid down their swords at her feet. Visenya took them as her own men, and they would owe allegiance only to the Iron Throne. They would bend the knee to her without quarrel, and she promised them that they would be direct vassals of only House Targaryen. Field of Fire. It was the only time Vhagar, Meraxes, and Balerion were all unleashed at once. The singers called it the Field of Fire. Aegon Targaryen, Lord of Dragonstone, had landed at what's now called King's Landing, and his campaign to subjugate the Seven Kingdoms was gaining momentum after they secured and obliterated Harrenhal, Crackclaw Point, and Storm's End. Aegon and his sister wives, Rhaenys and Visenya, assembled at Stony Sept with their dragons.
No one was calling her Daenerys the Conqueror yet, but perhaps they would. Aegon the Conqueror had won Westeros with 3 dragons, but she had taken Meereen with sewer rats and a wooden cock in less than a day.
Their force largely descripted from the recently liberated Riverlands, where there was commanded by Jorn Mutin of Maidenpole, one of the Force Lords who bent the knee to the Targaryens. As Aegon approached, King Lyanna Lannister of the Rock and King Men Gardner of the Reach united their armies at Golden Grove, aiming to repel the Targaryen invaders. Their combined forces outnumbered around 55,000 to the significant and underwhelming Targaryens, who only had 5,000 mounted knights against them.
Together the two kings commanded the mightiest host ever seen in Westeros, an army 55,000 strong, including some 600 lords, great and small, and more than 5,000 mounted knights.
Accompanied with powerful allies such as the Oakheart, Florence, Ran, and Peaks, and Red Wine, Man commanded the central with his son, Edmund leading the vanguard. Lauren took the right wing, notably Lord Menfriend Hightower, advised by the High Septon, chose to remain at Oldtown, refusing to join in the battle. The two armies clashed in the plains south of Blackwater, near what is now called Gold Road, while Lauren and Man planned to circle and crash through Aegon's forces with their surrendering numbers and a heavy sense of loss coming from the Targaryens. The Targaryens had established a feudal securing their imminent success as their allies charged on the battlefields, and if the Targaryen line broke, Aegon and his sister wives would descend with their dragons, Balerion, Meraxes, and Vhagar. The dragons, with their scales gleaming in the sunlight, set the dry field ablaze. The fire spread rapidly, engulfing with the winds sweeping up and around the Gardner and Lannister armies.
But by then Aegon and his sisters were in the air. Aegon flew above the ranks of his foes upon Balerion. Through a storm of spears and stones and arrows, swooping down repeatedly to bathe his foes in flame. Rhaenys and Visenya set fires upwind of the enemy and behind them. The dry grasses and stands of wheat went up at once.
Protected by the winds, Lord Mutin's Targaryen troops pushed off the fleeing enemy soldiers. King Lauren saw the opportunity and knew that his army and battle had been lost, and fled before the flames could engulf him. The dragons wreaked havoc, incarcerating and burning 1,000 men, including Lannister and the Reach army, including House Merton and all of his immediate kin. The Knights of the Order of the Green Hand were also obliterated. The Lord Armand Peake and his sons were also engulfed in by flames. Another 1,000 fell to sword, spear, and arrow, while 10,000 suffered severe burns. The Targaryens suffered minor losses, only having 100 or so falling in the battlefield. Visenya alone was wounded by an arrow to the shoulder.
Enough with the clever plans. I have 3 large dragons. I'm going to fly them to the Red Keep.
We've discussed this.
My enemies are in the Red Keep. What kind of a queen am I if I'm not willing to risk my life to fight them?
A smart one.
The sole survivor of House Gardner, a nephew of King Mutin, suffered severe burns and died 3 days later, ending House Gardner. The battle, now infamous as the Field of Fire, saw all 3 Targaryens and their dragons wreak havoc and devastation.
The Field of Fire. The battle was named afterward. More than 4,000 men died in the flames. Another 1,000 perished from sword and spears and arrows. Tens of thousands suffered burns, some so bad that they remained scarred for life.
The defeat had all the swords sent downriver to Aegon's fort, so they constructed it with the Iron Throne. Loren Lannister captured the next day, relinquished his claim to his throne, and accepted a lesser role as Warden of the West under the Targaryen rule. With Highgarden's steward, Harwell Tyrell, surrendering without a fight, Aegon claimed the X-Men's Gardner seat. He elevated House Tyrell over the dominion of the Reach, making Harlan Tyrell Lord of Highgarden, Lord Paramount of Manderley, and Warden of the East, despite fierce protests from Oakhart, Florence, Rowan's Peak, and Redwine, who have more of a status, but because they pledged loyalty and objections were made in vain to the opportunistic pursuit of power they displayed in the Field of Fire. As Aegon turned his sights northward,
at Winterfell, King Torrhen called his banners. Given the vast distances in the north, he knew that assembling an army would take
to face 30,000 northern men, led by Torrhen Stark, King of the North. He gathered support of the marshes, making his force now 45,000 from the Riverlands, Stormlands, Reach, and Westerlands. News of Harrenhal and the burning of the Field of Fire made Torrhen bend the knee, rather than have his castle and the north burn. Thus, Torrhen Stark became Aegon's Warden of the North, bringing another realm under Aegon's banner. The submission of the North. Aegon's next approach and tactic was to seize control over Oldtown, the Arbor, and Dorne. However, while at Highgarden, he received troubling news that alerted him that Torrhen Stark had amassed a formidable army of 3,000 northern men, crossing the neck and approaching towards the Trident. In a fervent urgency to seek strategy and higher ground, Aegon and his queens convened a meeting with the lords and knights who pledged loyalty to House Targaryen.
Aegon at once started north to meet him, racing ahead of his army on the wings of Balerion, the Black Dread. He sent word to his 2 queens as well, and to all the lords and knights who had bent the knee to him after Harrenhal and the Field of Fire.
The Targaryens' forces boosted of men from the Reach, Riverlands, Stormlands, and Westerlands, with their army gaining 50,000 men at their back now, as Torrhen's northern men approached the Trident with the vast expansion of the Targaryens looming southward and approaching from the river. A formidable wall of steel and fire came with them. The northern lords were divided. Some wanted an immediate assault, eager to seize the initiative.
The king's bastard brother, Brandon Snow, offered to cross the Trident alone, under cover of darkness, to slay the dragons whilst they slept.
While others wanted to fortify at Moat Cailin to make a clear strategy. Amongst heated debate, Brandon Snow, known as a ruthless and power-hungry strategist, wanted to assassinate the dragons while they slept. Haunted by the grim spectacle of Harrenhal and the Field of Fire, Torrhen chose a different path, realizing that if he did fight, his people would burn. So he sent Brandon and a sworn maester to negotiate.
The next morning, Torrhen Stark himself crossed the Trident. There upon the south bank of the Trident, he knelt, laid the ancient crown of the kings of winter at Aegon's feet, and swore to be his man. He rose as Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, a king no more. From that day to this day, Torrhen Stark is remembered as the king who knelt.
The following day, Torrhen, with a heavy heart and his displeasure for bloodshed, crossed the Trident and knelt to Aegon. The Starks of Winterfell are honorable and noble men.
But I could have sworn I read the last king in the north was Torrhen Stark, who bent the knee to my ancestor Aegon Targaryen. In exchange for his life and the lives of the Northmen, Torrhen Stark swore fealty to House Targaryen in perpetuity.
But forever in history, he was known as the king who knelted. The submission of the Vale. In response to Aegon Targaryen's swift conquest, Shah Aeryn, Queen Regent of the Vale, took it upon herself to fortify and make sure her castle was secure, putting more men and troops at the Bloody Gates and making sure the castle was well protected. She also sent terms to Aegon, extending her hand for a marriage alliance and wanting him to make her son his heir. Aegon's response was a refusal. It's widely believed that the seat of House Aeryn is impregnable. Undeterred, House Aeryn believed that their castle was safe and would withstand any attack. However, this shifted when Visenya descended upon them with her dragon Vhagar, descending upon them and landing in the courtyard, where Shara was stunned to find her son, Ronald, seated on the knee of Aegon's queen. Ronald's eyes gleamed with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, wishing to fly on the back of the dragon. Visenya was glad of the boy's request and granted him leave to ride with her on Vhagar, taking to the sky. The dragon circled the towers of Giant's Lance 3 times, casting a formidable shadow over the Vale. By the end of the flight, Ronald had been named Lord of the Eyrie, and Aegon had a Warden of the West, solidifying the Targaryens' dominance in the Vale. Invasion of Dorne. Maria, I will not fight you, nor will I kneel to you. Dorne has no king. Tell your brother that. Rhaenys, I shall. But when we come again, princess, next time we shall bring fire and blood. Maria, your house words. Ours is unbowed, unbent, unbroken. You may burn us, my lady, but you will not bend us, break us, or make us bow. This is Dorne. You are not wanted here. Return at your peril. Thus, queen and princess departed, and Dorne remained unconquered.
Of all the challenges the Dornishmen have faced, none have loomed so large as that posed by Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters. Great was the valour the Dornish showed in battle, and great the grief at the losses they suffered, for the price of freedom was steep. Yet alone of all the 7 kingdoms, Dorne remained independent of House Targaryen.
Before Aegon's conquest had even begun, Princess Maria Marcelle of Dorne extended an offer of alliances to Aegon, but the proposition was to unite against the Storm King. Aegon did not want to make alliances, he wanted bent knees, so he declined the proposition. During the early stages of Aegon's campaign, Aegon's sister wife, Queen Rhaenys Targaryen, led an army into Dorne. Yet the Dornish forces were abandoned in various territories. Rhaenys' troops led and captured Holdfast, but the Dornish had emerged and melted away with only leaving women and children behind. Thus Rhaenys flew her dragon Meraxes to Sunspear. There she had an encounter with Princess Maria, bluntly refusing and accepting the plea terms. She told her to leave Dorne as she was not wanted. Even this show of force, Dorne did not bend, and House Targaryen was unable to conquer it for many years to come.
So again, the Targaryens turned to their dragons, unleashing their fury upon Starfall and Skyreach and Hellholt. It was at Hellholt where the Dornish had their greatest success against the Targaryens.
In 4 AC, Aegon unleashed a furious second attempt on Dorne to subdue it. This will be known as the First Dornish War. The conflict was marked by grim milestones. Lord Orys Baratheon was subsequently injured grimly, and Queen Rhaenys and Meraxes was killed.
A bolt from a scorpion pierced the eye of Meraxes, and the great dragon and the queen who rode upon it fell from the sky. In her death throes, the dragon destroyed the castle's highest tower and part of the curtain wall. Queen Rhaenys' body was never returned to King's Landing.
At Harrenhal in 10 AC, this formidable and disputed account of what will be known as the first dragon slaying by a scorpion. This also came about when a Kingsguard member had a failed attempt at assassinating Aegon. The war continued until 13 AC.
She could eat none of it. Did Rhaegar ever grow so weary? She wondered. Did Aegon after his conquest?
When Princess Maria Martell died, her successor, Prince Niminin Martell, sent a chilling message to King Aegon with the skull of Meraxes and a cryptic letter, which nobody knows what it said as the letter was stayed in secrecy. This act defined in a pivotal moment as Aegon signed a peace treaty with Dorne and allowed them to be an independent kingdom, although Aegon and many kings after him still called it the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros, even though they did not have Dorne for a very long time. King Viserys Targaryen later considered marrying his heir Rhaenyra Targaryen to the Prince of Dorne, but he finally refused the offer, ultimately thinking that there would be a better match for her, and allowed the Martells to rule their desert lands. The submission of Oldtown and the crowning by the faith. When news of Aegon's landing reached Oldtown, the High Sparrow withdrew himself into the Starry Night Sept, while he subsequently prayed for 7 following nights and days, seeking divine counsel amidst the 7 gods.
If Oldtown took up arms against Aegon the Dragon, his High Holiness saw, the city would surely burn, and the high tower and the citadel and the starry sept would be cast down and destroyed.
On the 7th night, amidst flickering flames and shadows, it is said the crone raised a golden lamp, revealing a haunting vision. Oldtown would be consumed by fire if the Targaryens advanced.
A dragon is worth more than any army.
Aegon Targaryen proved that.
In the face of this ominous prophecy, Manfred Hightower, Lord of Hightower, chose to dismount his arms, and Hightower thus concluded without bloodshed. That is why they did not participate in the conflict at the Field of Fire.
Yet when Aegon Targaryen and his host approached Oldtown, they found the city gates open, and Lord Hightower waiting to make his submission.
When Aegon approached and was near Oldtown, they did not clash of arms, but rather opened their gates and allowed him to walk in freely. Lord Hightower himself bent the knee while the gates opened. 3 days later, within the hallowed halls of the Starry Sept, the High Sparrow performed a momentous ceremony. Aegon was crowned with the Valyrian gauntlet and anointed with the sacred 7 oils. He was proclaimed
3 days later, in the Starry Sept, His High Holiness himself anointed Aegon with the 7 oils, placed a crown upon his head, and proclaimed him Aegon of House Targaryen.
First of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdom, and Protector of the Realm. This grand ceremony marked the official dawn of Aegon's reign, solidifying his dominion over the new unified realm. Aftermath. Aegon Targaryen's conquest reshaped the destiny of Westeros, unifying the factions of the kingdoms under a single reign for the first time. Beginning with his inheritance of Dragonstone, Aegon laid wastes to armies and built a formidable dynasty that nobody has ever seen.
I am Daenerys Stormborn, of House Targaryen, of the blood of old Valyria. I am the dragon's daughter, and I swear to you that those who would harm you will die screaming.
Subduing Harrenhal, Crackclaw Point, and Storm's End, having his formidable dragons and his sister wives fight alongside him, he forged a path of awe and terror, making his rise revered and feared.
The dragon has 3 heads. There are 2 men in the world who I can trust, if I can find them. I will not be alone then. We will be 3 against the world, like Aegon and his sisters.
The infamous Field of Fire and Harrenhal lives on in present-day Game of Thrones. Despite facing forces with powerful lords like Argilac Durrandon of the Stormlands and Torrhen Stark of the North, Aegon's might within military opposition and the strength of his sister queens, Rhaenys and Visenya, guaranteed him success on the battlefield and was not marked by bloodshed alone, but by people bending the knee.
From there Aegon the Dragon ruled his realm, holding court from a great metal seat made from the melted, twisted, beaten, and broken blades of all his fallen foes. A perilous seat that would soon be known through all the world as the Iron Throne of Westeros.
This act united the realm together with limited bloodshed. The legacy of Aegon's conquest extended beyond mere territory domain. By unifying the 7 kingdoms, Aegon established new political orders that would endure for centuries. His reign concluded and preserved the Targaryen dynasty that had never been seen in Westeros.
The mamas of the ship showed her how a hero stands, and taught her speeches from the Song of the Rhine, the Conqueror's 2 wives, and the Merchant's lusty lady.
Reshaping the political landscape, the Iron Throne, forged from the swords of Aegon's fallen enemies, is a symbol of authority and power holding over the realm of men. Aegon's legacy is a tale of ambition and visions of fire and blood, and a realm's transformation within a secular vision of unity. His conquest not only set the stage for the future of Westeros, but also left an indelible mark on history, embodying the ruthless desires forging an empire from the ash of divided kingdoms.